Only SEALs use that hand signal, Major. So I'll ask you once, who exactly trained you?
The mug hit the floor before she could answer. Coffee splashed across the general's boots. His eyes locked on hers, not in anger, but disbelief. Because Leona Park had just replied to a classified SEAL extraction signal with the correct counter, and she wasn't supposed to know it even existed. In that moment, a career hung in the balance. A buried operation began to resurface, and the identity of one silent hero, hidden for years, was seconds away from setting the Pentagon on fire. This is Veteran Biker. Comment 1 if you're new. 2 if you've been with us, 3 if you ride with us every week. Like, subscribe, and stay to the end. The Pacific Northwest is a land of whispered power. Central Command HQ, a monolith of reinforced concrete and glass, stands sentinel over the sprawling cityscape of Seattle, its polished marble floors and silent corridors, a stark contrast to the chaotic world its occupants command. It is a place where careers are forged and broken in the sterile light of fluorescent bulbs, a place where a reputation for perfection is a prerequisite for entry. Major Leona Park, a woman who carried herself with the kind of quiet authority that commanded attention without demanding it, adjusted the collar of her olive-drab jacket. Her dark, sleek bob haircut was precisely in place, and a faint, almost invisible scar traced the curve of her left cheek, a silent testament to a history she rarely spoke of. She was a top-tier intelligence officer, a mind built for puzzles and patterns, but today she was merely a subject. She was here for a security clearance evaluation, a routine formality for an officer of her rank, but the name on the door added a layer of complexity she had carefully prepared for. Lieutenant General Mitchell Rourke. The name was synonymous with ruthless brilliance. He was a relic, a man who had clawed his way through the ranks during an era when the rules of engagement were written in blood, not on paper. Whispers in the halls claimed he was more psychologist than general, a master of unconventional evaluations, often using seemingly casual conversations to probe the very limits of an officer's psyche. Some called his methods genius, others a form of intellectual cruelty. Leona, having studied his history, suspected he was both. She took a deep breath, the sterile air filling her lungs, and knocked twice. Her knuckles made a sharp, echoing sound in the silent hallway. "Enter," a gravelly voice commanded from within. The office was exactly as she had pictured it. Not a space for comfort, but a monument to power. A massive mahogany desk, large enough to serve as a command center, dominated the room. Its surface was clean, save for a few meticulously organized folders and a single ceramic coffee mug. The walls were adorned not with art but with commendations, framed photographs of Rourke with presidents and foreign dignitaries, and vintage maps that showed battle lines drawn in forgotten conflicts. The room smelled of old paper, leather, and a faint metallic tang of steel. Behind the desk sat General Rourke himself, a man in his late 50s with hair the color of gunmetal and eyes that seemed to miss absolutely nothing. He was flipping through a file, her file, without looking up. His gaze, even in its absence, felt like a physical presence. "Major Park," he said, his voice a low rumble that filled the expansive room. "West Point, top 5%. Intelligence officer with deployments in a litany of hot zones. Your record is, for lack of a better word, exemplary. A testament to textbook training and flawless execution." He finally raised his eyes, his stare an unblinking bore. "Have a seat." Leona moved with the practiced grace of a soldier, her posture perfect as she settled into the leather chair opposite his desk. The chair was designed to be comfortable, but Leona's rigid discipline made it feel like a throne of iron. Rourke continued to sift through the pages, occasionally humming or making a small, dismissive noise. The silence that stretched between them was not a void, but a weapon. A silent probe designed to test her composure. Leona's mind was a fortress, her thoughts disciplined and orderly. She would not crack, she would not fidget, she would not give him a single unearned tell. The only sounds were the distant hum of the building's ventilation and the rustle of paper as Rourke turned a page. "Tell me, Major," Rourke said suddenly, his tone shifting. He closed the file with a decisive snap, the sound echoing like a gunshot. "What do you think is the biggest difference between a good intelligence officer and a truly great one?" Leona had prepared for this. She knew the game. She knew he was looking for a chink in her armor. Her answer was measured, precise, and devoid of emotion. "Attention to detail, sir. The ability to find patterns in chaos, and the wisdom to understand when information is actionable versus merely interesting." Rourke leaned back, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Textbook. A beautiful, perfectly polished textbook answer. He stood and walked to the large window, looking out over the rain-slicked streets of Seattle. "But you know what I think? I think the difference is this: a great intelligence officer understands that in this business, everyone is testing everyone else all the time. Every conversation, every gesture, every seemingly innocent comment. It's a probe, a test." He turned back, his expression now serious, predatory. "You young officers today, you think you're so sophisticated, so well-trained. You come out of your schools with a clipboard full of theories, but real warfare, real intelligence work, that's learned in the field, not in a classroom." The atmosphere in the room shifted, the temperature dropping a few degrees. This was it. This wasn't a promotion review anymore. This was the test Rourke was famous for, the one whispered about in mess halls and officer clubs. Leona remained silent, her expression unreadable, waiting for him to make his move. He began to pace, his hands clasped behind his back. "They watch movies about special operations," Rourke continued, his voice carrying a mocking edge. "They think they understand what true warriors go through. They don't. Only the elite know what real sacrifice looks like." As he spoke, he moved closer to her chair, his right hand moving almost casually to his side, his fingers forming a subtle, almost unnoticeable configuration. To any other observer, it would have been nothing more than a relaxed gesture, a minor twitch of the fingers. But Leona's blood turned to ice. The hand signal was unmistakable. A classified Navy SEAL extraction signal. Its meaning, burned into her mind from a long-forgotten time, was clear as day: enemy contact. Need immediate backup. Time seemed to slow. 100 thoughts, 1,000 possibilities flashed through Leona's mind with the speed of a microchip. Was this truly a test? How could an army general, no matter his reputation, know such an obscure, compartmentalized signal? Had he somehow learned it through legitimate channels? Or was this something far more sinister? For a brief, terrifying moment, the logical, rational part of her mind screamed at her to pretend she hadn't seen it, to feign ignorance. It was the safe choice, the career-preserving choice. But something in Rourke's eyes, a flicker of challenge, a cold calculation, suggested he was looking for a specific reaction. Without conscious thought, without even a flicker of hesitation, muscle memory took over. Her left hand, which had been resting casually on the arm of the chair, shifted into a corresponding counter-signal. It was a movement so subtle, so quick, that someone unfamiliar with SEAL protocols would have never noticed it. But Rourke noticed. His left hand, which had been holding a ceramic coffee mug, simply forgot. The mug slipped from his fingers, a silent drop in a room that had suddenly gone quiet. The ceramic shattered against the polished hardwood floor, the sound a sharp, deafening crack that echoed like a gunshot. The coffee, a dark, rich liquid, splashed across his polished shoes and seeped into the expensive Persian rug beneath his desk. Rourke's face drained of all color, his weathered features going ashen as he stared, not at the broken mug, but at Leona's hand. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. For a man who had commanded thousands, who had faced enemy fire in the jungles and boardrooms of the world, he looked utterly stunned. "Major Park," he whispered, his voice barely audible, a fragile thread of sound in the now silent room. "How in God's name do you know that signal?" The silence that followed General Rourke's question was a suffocating weight. The shattered mug on the floor and the spreading dark stain of coffee served as a grotesque punctuation mark to the unbelievable moment. For a man who had faced the unimaginable, Rourke's shock was a raw, unfiltered emotion that exposed a fissure in his legend. He stood frozen, his eyes, once a steel-grey bore, now filled with a stunned disbelief. Leona, a master of maintaining her composure, met his gaze with an unnerving calm. Her mind, a whirlwind of probabilities and contingencies, had already moved past the moment of shock. She was calculating her next move, preparing for the inevitable fallout. Rourke moved first, his hand hovering over a secure telephone with the deliberate speed of a predator. His casual tone from moments before was gone, replaced by a cold official cadence. "I'm going to ask you one more time, Major, and I suggest you think very carefully before you answer. How do you know classified Navy SEAL hand signals?" Leona began to speak, but Rourke cut her off with a sharp gesture. He had already made his decision. He picked up the secure phone and dialed a 3-digit extension. "This is Rourke. I need a security team in my office immediately. Full lockdown protocol." He hung up and turned back to Leona, his face a mask of grim determination. "Major Park, you are not to leave this room or speak to anyone until this matter is resolved." Within minutes, the office door burst open. 2 uniformed military police officers entered first, their presence a chilling reminder of the gravity of the situation. They were followed by a woman in civilian clothes who radiated the unmistakable cold aura of a senior intelligence officer. She was tall, with light blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun, and her posture was that of someone accustomed to walking into a room and taking charge. "General Morrison," the woman said, her voice a sharp, clear instrument. "Colonel Clara Jensen, Defense Intelligence Agency. You said we have a potential security breach." Rourke gestured toward Leona. "Colonel, Major Leona Park just demonstrated knowledge of a classified SEAL communication protocol, a protocol that is compartmentalized well above her clearance level. It's an extraction signal. I need to know where she learned it." Colonel Jensen's eyes, the color of a winter sky, locked onto Leona. They were the calculating eyes of a predator sizing up its prey. There was no emotion, only a cold, methodical focus. "Major, you're coming with me. This conversation will continue in a more appropriate setting." The more appropriate setting turned out to be a windowless room 3 floors below ground level, accessible only through a series of security checkpoints that required biometric scans, armed escorts, and a chilling sense of finality. The room was sterile and cold, containing nothing but a metal table, 3 chairs, and a recording device. Jensen activated the recorder with a deliberate click. "This is Colonel Clara Jensen, DIA. Conducting a security interview with Major Leona Park, Army Intelligence, regarding potential unauthorized access to classified materials. You are advised that this interview is being recorded and that any false statements may result in criminal prosecution." For the next 6 hours, Jensen and a rotating team of interrogators subjected Leona to the most intense questioning of her life. The approach was classic. They came at the problem from every possible angle. They dissected her training history, her deployments, her personal relationships, her financial records. They wanted to know about every person she had ever met, every base she had ever visited, every operation she had ever been briefed on. The questions were relentless, a constant, draining flood of information requests designed to wear her down. "Let's go through your deployment history again," said Major Carter, the 3rd interrogator to take a seat across from her. "Iraq 2018 to 2019, Afghanistan 2020, and then," he flipped through the pages of a tablet. "There's a gap here. 6 months where your location is listed as classified assignment. What were you doing during that time?" Leona had answered this question 4 times already. Her voice was steady, calm, a testament to her iron will. "I was assigned to a Joint Intelligence Fusion Center. The location and mission details are classified above my current clearance level to discuss." "That's convenient," Carter replied, a cynical edge to his voice. "A classified assignment you can't talk about, which just happens to coincide with a period when you might have learned SEAL protocols. Don't you think that's a little coincidental?" Leona remained silent, staring at the interrogator with an unreadable expression. Her story was the one she had been briefed to tell, the perfect, unassailable wall of operational security that had protected her for years. But she knew this wall was beginning to show cracks. Colonel Jensen returned to the room carrying a fresh cup of coffee and a thick file folder. She sat down, her movements controlled and precise. "Major, we've been at this for hours, and your story hasn't changed. That's either a sign of remarkable consistency or very, very good preparation." She opened the folder and a new wave of tension washed over the room. "But here's what's interesting. We've contacted every Joint Intelligence Fusion Center that was operational during your supposed assignment. None of them have any record of you." Leona felt a cold knot form in her stomach. This was the moment of truth. She maintained her composure, her face a perfect blank. "Ma'am, if the assignment was classified at the level I believe it was, those records might not be accessible through normal channels." Jensen laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Normal channels? Major, I have access to channels that most people in this building don't even know exist. If you were assigned somewhere legitimate, I would know about it. So let's try a different approach. We're not here to break you, we're here to understand. What are you hiding? And more importantly, why?" The interrogation continued as the hours blended together, the relentless pressure of physical force. They brought her water and stale sandwiches, but offered no relief from the constant repetitive questions. The clock on the wall crept past midnight, and Leona realized they were using a classic technique: exhaustion and repetition. "Keep asking the same questions until the subject either breaks down or makes a mistake." "Let's be direct, Major," Jensen said, settling back into her chair. "We know you're hiding something. The question is whether you're hiding it because you're a traitor, or because you're protecting something legitimate that you've been ordered to keep secret." Leona looked up at the sterile white ceiling, calculating her options. The oath she had taken 3 years ago had been specific and absolute. But sitting here, facing accusations of treason, she knew her pre-approved cover was no longer enough. It was a one-way street now. She had to either reveal the key to her past or risk everything. "If I were to hypothetically know something," Leona began carefully, her voice low and steady, "that was classified beyond my current clearance. What would be the proper procedure for addressing that situation?" Jensen leaned forward, sensing a crack in Leona's defenses. "That would depend on how you came to know it and who authorized your access to that information." Leona took a deep breath, knowing that her next words would either save her or end her career. "Then I need you to make a phone call." "To whom?" Jensen asked, her voice tight with expectation. "Admiral Julian Carr," Leona said, meeting Jensen's gaze directly. "Naval Special Warfare Command." She paused for a beat, letting the name sink in. "Tell him that Obsidian Whisper needs to come in from the cold." The effect was immediate and dramatic. Jensen's confident expression vanished, replaced by something that looked almost like fear. She stood up so quickly her chair scraped against the concrete floor. "What did you just say?" she whispered, the cold calculation gone from her eyes. "Operation Obsidian Whisper," Leona repeated, her voice firm. "Admiral Carr will know what that means." Jensen was already reaching for her secure phone, her hand trembling slightly. "This interview is suspended pending further investigation." The interrogation had come to a sudden, dramatic halt, and Leona was now left alone in the cold, silent room, the humming of the recording device the only sound. She had just set a chain of events in motion that would either save her or destroy her. The secure phone in Colonel Jensen's hand had seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds. Her confident, predatory demeanor had evaporated the moment Leona uttered the 2 words, "Obsidian Whisper." The fluorescent lights in the windowless room hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows that made the concrete walls feel even more claustrophobic. Leona watched as Jensen, her face a mask of shock and alarm, paced the small room like a caged animal. The colonel's fingers hovered over the keypad for a long moment before she finally began dialing. "This is Colonel Jensen, dear. I need to speak with Admiral Julian Carr immediately. Priority Alpha clearance." She paused, listening to the response on the other end. "I don't care what time it is. Tell him it's about Obsidian Whisper." The waiting was the hardest part. The minutes stretched into an eternity, each tick of the clock a hammer blow against Leona's exhausted psyche. Her body, trained to endure physical and psychological stress, was now running on fumes. She had played her last card, a high-stakes gamble with her career, her freedom, and perhaps her life. She was no longer fighting against an interrogation. She was waiting to be judged by the architect of the very secret she had spent years protecting. She closed her eyes, the memories of a life that no longer existed, threatening to break through the carefully constructed walls of her mind. Nearly half an hour later, the door burst open with such force it slammed against the concrete wall. Admiral Julian Carr strode into the room. At 65, he was a legend in naval special warfare circles, a man who had commanded SEAL teams in conflicts that officially never happened, in operations that would never appear in any history book. He was still in civilian clothes, a dark suit that suggested he had been pulled from his bed in the middle of the night. His steel-grey eyes swept the room, taking in Colonel Jensen's nervous posture and Leona's exhausted but defiant expression. When his gaze finally settled on Leona, something shifted in his weathered features. It was a flicker of recognition, followed by what might have been relief, or perhaps a deep-seated anger. "Everyone out," Carr commanded, his voice carrying the absolute authority of a man accustomed to being obeyed without question. "Now." "Admiral, this is a DIA investigation," Colonel Jensen began to protest, her voice tight with professional indignation. "Colonel Jensen," Carr interrupted, his tone dropping to a dangerous whisper that was more cutting than a shout, "you are about to stumble into water so deep that your security clearance won't even get you a life jacket. I suggest you and your people take a walk and wait outside." The room cleared in seconds, leaving Leona alone with the Admiral. The air, heavy with unspoken tension, was now thick with history. Carr moved to the recording device and switched it off with a decisive click, then produced a small electronic device from his pocket. He activated it, and a barely audible hum filled the room, a signal jammer that would defeat any listening devices. He then sat down in the chair across from her, his presence filling the sterile space. "Major Leona Park," he said, his voice softer now, devoid of the previous command. Or should I say, "Journalist Sarah Mitchell, war correspondent for International News Network?" The words hit Leona like a physical blow. 1,000 emotions which she had carefully suppressed for 3 long years threatened to spill over. It was the name she had buried, the person she had been forced to kill. Tears welled in her eyes, a sign of weakness she hadn't allowed herself to show during 6 hours of relentless interrogation. "Admiral," she said, her voice a fragile whisper. "I wasn't sure you'd remember." Carr laughed, a short, bitter sound without humor. "Remember? Major, what you did in Yemen is burned into my memory like a brand. The question is, how the hell did you end up in an interrogation room in the Pentagon playing games with Rourke?" Leona, now speaking to the only person who understood the truth, explained the encounter with General Rourke. She recounted the hand signals, the test, and the subsequent investigation that had led her to this room. As she spoke, Carr's expression grew darker, his jaw tightening with what appeared to be barely controlled anger. Admiral Carr's face, a mask of grim resolve moments ago, contorted into a snarl of barely contained fury. He didn't just mutter, he growled the words with a low, menacing intensity. "Those idiots," he repeated, the 2 words a venomous distillation of his professional contempt for the Pentagon's bureaucracy and Rourke's misguided tactics. "They nearly blew an operation 3 years in the making over a juvenile game of cat and mouse." He leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking under his weight, his eyes no longer fixed on her military record, but on her face, a place where he saw not a rank, but a person. The air in the room, already heavy with the past, now felt charged with an intimate, personal history. "Sarah," he said, using her name for the first time since he entered the room. The sound of it, a ghost from a life she had buried, hit Leona with a force she hadn't anticipated. It was a word that brought back the dust of Yemen, the scent of spent gunpowder, and the weight of a responsibility she thought she had left behind. Her composure, so meticulously maintained, threatened to splinter. "I need to know," he continued, his voice softer but no less demanding. "Have you told them anything about Yemen?" "Nothing, sir," Leona replied, her voice firm and clear, a testament to the discipline she had honed over the years. "I've maintained operational security exactly as briefed. I gave them the key, the 2 words I was told to give if I was ever cornered: Obsidian Whisper." Carr nodded, a slow, deliberate gesture of approval. "Good, because what I'm about to tell you cannot leave this room, and after tonight, we may never be able to speak of it again." He stood and began to pace, his hands clasped behind his back, a gesture Leona remembered from their brief, intense time together. The posture of a man wrestling with a strategic puzzle of immense consequence. The gesture spoke volumes, a silent language they both understood. Operation Obsidian Whisper was conceived in the aftermath of a series of catastrophic intelligence failures, Carr began, his voice taking on the official, somber tone of a debriefing. "We had concrete, irrefutable intelligence that a terrorist cell operating out of Yemen had acquired chemical weapons. Not just some small-scale, dirty bomb. They had sarin gas, enough from a corrupt government stockpile to do real, widespread damage. The attack was scheduled to coincide with a major international event on US soil. The intelligence suggested it would make previous attacks look like minor skirmishes. We were looking at a potential body count in the thousands, if not more. We were facing a silent, invisible war, a war that no one could see or track, and a war that would be over before anyone even knew it had begun." The sheer scale of what she had helped prevent, the horrifying details of a mission she had only known in fragments, hit Leona with a sickening force. Her mission wasn't just to save a team, it was to save a city. Leona remembered the tension in the safe house, the constant radio chatter, the way the SEAL team members had checked and rechecked their weapons. The problem, Carr continued, was that this cell had gone completely dark. No electronic communications, no financial transactions. They were using human couriers exclusively, and they'd learned to spot our traditional operatives from a mile away. We needed someone who could get close to them without triggering their security protocols. A war correspondent with legitimate credentials, someone who could move freely through the region and ask questions without arousing suspicion. "That's where I came in," Leona said quietly. "Exactly. What we didn't expect was how quickly you'd adapt to working with a SEAL team. 2 weeks of intensive training at a black site facility that didn't appear on any map. You learned tactical hand signals, radio protocols, extraction procedures. The SEALs were skeptical at first, viewing you as a liability they'd been forced to accept. But you, Major, you threw yourself into that training with a determination that surprised even our best operators. The team leader, Chief Caleb Monroe, said you were the fastest study he'd ever worked with. By the end of the first week, you were communicating with the team like you'd been doing it for years." Leona smiled at the memory of Chief Monroe, a gruff veteran who had initially refused to speak to her beyond operational necessities. By the end of their mission, he had been calling her Doc and treating her like a member of his team. "The insertion went perfectly," Carr said, his voice taking on the cadence of an after-action report. "You established contact with the terrorist cell within 48 hours, gained their trust, and began feeding US intelligence about their planned attacks. For 3 weeks, everything went according to plan." But Leona remembered when everything went wrong, the morning she arrived at the safe house to find it empty, except for a single bloodstain and a hastily scrawled message in Arabic that translated to, "The Americans are here." "The cell had been feeding us false information," Carr continued. "They knew about you from the beginning, and they'd been using you to identify our safe houses. When they finally made their move, they hit 3 of our locations simultaneously. They trapped Monroe's team in a building surrounded by hostile forces." Leona closed her eyes, remembering the panic in Chief Monroe's voice over the radio, the extraction helicopter shot down, and the backup team still hours away. "That's when you made the decision that saved 6 American lives," Carr said softly. "You could have run. You could have maintained your cover and walked away. Instead, you chose to blow your cover and coordinate the rescue operation yourself. Using the terrorist cell's own radio equipment, she had coordinated with American forces while simultaneously feeding false information to the terrorists. She had guided Monroe's team through a maze of hostile territory using hand signals and radio protocols she had learned just weeks before. The extraction was a masterpiece of improvisation, Carr said with genuine admiration. You turned the terrorists' own communication network against them, created diversions, and guided our teams to safety through routes that shouldn't have existed. After the extraction, we had a problem. Your cover was blown, but the terrorist cell was still operational. We couldn't risk them discovering that their journalist was actually working with American Special Forces. So, we erased you. Sarah Mitchell, war correspondent, died in a car bombing in Damascus, Leona said. The words a cold, factual summary of her own death. Her body was never recovered. My network was told I had been killed while investigating a story. Carr's expression was grim. Major Leona Park returned to her Army intelligence career with a classified gap in her service record and orders never to speak of what had happened. Now you understand why the interrogation was so intense. From the outside, your knowledge of SEAL protocols looked like a security breach. But the truth was buried so deep that even DIA investigators couldn't access it. Until you gave them the key. Admiral, Leona said carefully, the weight of her past now a physical presence in the room. What happens now? Carr was quiet for a long moment, weighing his words. Now, Major, we have to decide whether Obsidian Whisper stays buried or whether it's time for the truth to come out. The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of the past, the present, and the uncertain future. The cold, sterile air of the interrogation room seemed to crackle with an unspoken energy. Admiral Julian Carr's question hung in the air, heavy with the weight of a monumental decision. Now, Major, we have to decide whether Obsidian Whisper stays buried or whether it's time for the truth to come out. For Leona, the choice wasn't a simple binary, it was an impossible paradox. To keep the secret was to preserve the operational security she had sworn to uphold, to continue living a life defined by a lie. But to reveal it was to open a Pandora's box, a can of worms that would unleash forces she couldn't possibly anticipate. The silence that followed was not a void but a crucible, forging the next chapter of her life. Carr didn't wait for an answer. He began to pace again, his hands clasped behind his back, a silent testament to the gravity of his thoughts. He wasn't just speaking to her now, he was briefing her, bringing her into the fold of a truth far larger than she had ever known. Obsidian Whisper was not a mission to simply prevent an attack. It was a mission to prevent a catastrophe. He stopped and looked directly at her, his eyes holding the haunted look of a man who had seen the abyss. 3 months ago, we received intelligence that remnants of that terrorist cell in Yemen have regrouped. They've been hunting. Leona felt a chill run down her spine, a primal coldness that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. She had known the mission was important, but the scope of it had been kept from her. The full picture, the true scale of the threat, was a blank spot in her memory, a classified vacuum she had been ordered never to fill. The intelligence you gathered, Major, Carr continued, his voice dropping to a low, intense whisper, didn't just save 6 SEALs, it prevented a chemical attack on American soil that would have killed thousands. They had acquired sarin gas, enough to contaminate a major metropolitan area. We kept that from you, from everyone, because the fewer people who knew the complete picture, the safer everyone was. We classified it above a level that even our own agents could access. That's why you were never told. That's why your record was scrubbed, and why you were given a new life. The revelation hit Leona like a physical blow. She had always believed her mission was important, a matter of national security. But the thought that her actions had averted a domestic chemical attack on that scale was staggering. It wasn't just a mission, it was a ghost story, a terrifying hypothetical that had been made real, and she was the one who had written the happy ending. The years of suppressing her past, the loneliness of living a lie, all of it suddenly made a grim, terrifying kind of sense. The silence, the secrecy, the isolation, it was all for the greater good. It was to protect the nation from a threat that had been buried in the shadows. The air in the sterile interrogation room, already heavy with the weight of the past, grew thick with a new, terrifying tension. Admiral Carr's voice, which had been a steady, professional instrument of exposition, broke through her thoughts with a low, chilling tremor. "But circumstances have changed," he said, his eyes, which had held the distant look of a historian, now snapped into a sharp, focused intensity. "The remnants of that terrorist cell, they're not just rebuilding, they're planning a revenge operation. And they have a new, all-consuming obsession. For 3 years, they've been hunting for the mysterious journalist who they believe destroyed their plans. They know Sarah Mitchell is dead, but they've pieced together enough to suspect she had help from someone who's still alive, someone who had a connection to American Special Forces." The words landed on Leona like a physical blow. The chill she had felt earlier deepened, becoming a cold dread that settled deep in her bones. A primal fear that her carefully constructed wall of anonymity was not a fortress, but a fragile illusion. The whispered reports she had been trained to ignore, the subtle shifts in the intelligence she had been ordered to compartmentalize, suddenly coalesced into a terrifying, singular truth. "They're looking for me," Leona said, the words barely audible, a fragile whisper of a ghost acknowledging its own existence. "Not just you," Carr corrected, his voice now a dangerous, low-pitched growl, his eyes fixed on hers with an unwavering intensity. He was no longer just an admiral, he was a sentinel, warning her of a clear and present danger. "They're looking for anyone connected to Obsidian Whisper. That includes the SEAL team you saved, the support personnel who set up the safe houses, the analysts who helped process the intel, and yes, the intelligence officer who somehow learned their protocols well enough to coordinate a rescue operation. Your knowledge of those hand signals isn't just a security concern anymore, Major. It's a target painted on your back, a neon sign broadcasting your existence to a group of men who are now solely focused on revenge. Your ghost identity is no longer your shield, it's your greatest vulnerability." The full, brutal reality of his words hit Leona with a sickening finality. She hadn't just put her own career at risk with the hand signal. She had, in a single instinctive gesture, confirmed the terrorists' worst suspicions and put a target on the backs of everyone she had ever worked with. The years of silence, the carefully maintained lie, the unwavering adherence to her oath, all of it had been for nothing. The past she had tried so hard to bury was not just coming back, it was coming back with a vengeance. The implication was staggering, a cold, brutal twist of fate. For 3 years she had believed her anonymity was her shield, a wall of classification that made her invisible. But it had all been an illusion. The very thing that had made her a ghost in the system had now made her a target. Her careful maintenance of operational security, her unflinching silence during the interrogation, it had all served to confirm the terrorists' worst fears. Her existence, and the fact that she was still a part of the system, had validated their suspicion that they had been betrayed by an insider. The DIA's interrogation, while a misguided test, had unknowingly confirmed a terrifying piece of intelligence. The hand signal, the one that had broken General Rourke's composure and launched her into this underground room, was not a test from Rourke alone. It was an echo of a threat that was coming for her, and for everyone she had ever worked with. The weight of this new truth was immense. Leona realized her decision was no longer just about her career. It was about the lives of Chief Caleb Monroe and the other 5 men she had guided to safety. It was about protecting the legacy of an operation that had saved thousands. Her secrecy, the very thing she had been praised for, had become a liability. Her anonymity was not a protection, it was a ticking time bomb. The longer she remained in the shadows, the more dangerous she became to those she sought to protect. The terrorists would continue their hunt, their search a relentless, methodical process that would eventually lead them to the truth. And when they found it, the fallout would be catastrophic. "What are you proposing?" Leona finally asked, her voice steady despite the turmoil raging inside her. Carr moved to the metal table, leaning forward with his hands planted on the cold surface. "Full disclosure. We bring Obsidian Whisper out of the black. We declassify what we can. We give you the recognition you've earned. More importantly, We put you under the protection of a joint task force that can keep you safe while using your unique experience for future operations. We use you, Major. We weaponize your experience. We let the world know what you did, and we make it clear that you are under the full protection of the United States government." Before Leona could respond, a sharp knock echoed through the room. Carr deactivated the jammer and called out, "Enter." Colonel Jensen stepped in, her earlier confidence replaced by obvious nervousness. "Admiral, I have General Rourke and the Secretary of Defense on a secure video conference. They're demanding an immediate briefing on this situation, and General Rourke wants you to bring Major Park with you." Carr nodded grimly. It was time. He turned to Leona, his expression serious. "Major, what happens in the next hour will determine the rest of your career. It will define the rest of your life. Are you ready?" The question hung in the air, a final challenge, a grim acceptance of her fate. The ghost of Sarah Mitchell was about to step into the light. Her years of silence were over. The quiet life she had built was about to be shattered. The war she had fought in the shadows was about to become very, very public. And she knew with an absolute certainty that chilled her to the bone that the real fight was just beginning. The journey to the secure conference room felt like a walk to the gallows. Leona found herself flanked by Admiral Carr and a visibly nervous Colonel Jensen, moving through corridors that seemed to grow more imposing with each step. The air was heavy, charged with the kind of silent dread that precedes a storm. This wasn't just a meeting, it was a reckoning. She was no longer a major under suspicion, but an exhibit, the living proof of a secret that had been carefully buried for 3 years, a secret that had now been thrust onto the table of the highest echelons of military power. The fluorescent lights glinted off the polished floors, and the rhythmic thump of their footsteps was the only sound in the somber march toward a destiny she had no control over. The conference room they entered was a testament to American military might and technological prowess. The walls were not lined with commendations, but with secure communication equipment, multiple screens displaying classified information, and a large table that had hosted decisions affecting global security for decades. General Rourke was already seated at the table, his earlier shock replaced by a grim determination. His eyes met Leona's for a brief moment, and she saw not the cunning predator from his office, but a man wrestling with a profound professional and personal reassessment. On the main screen, the face of Secretary of Defense Robert Williams appeared via a secure video link, his expression unreadable, a stone-faced arbiter of fate. Leona recognized 2 other figures in the room, General Patricia Hawkins, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, a woman whose reputation for surgical precision in strategic planning was legendary, and Director Michael Vance of the Defense Intelligence Agency, whose gaze was as cold and calculating as Colonel Jensen's. "Admiral Carr," Secretary Williams began, his voice devoid of preamble. "I understand we have a situation that requires immediate clarification. Please proceed with your briefing." Carr nodded grimly and activated a presentation system. The room's multiple screens instantly filled with a cascade of classified documents, satellite imagery, and operational timelines. The voiceover began, and Leona felt herself a ghost watching her own history unfold. "Mr. Secretary General's Director," Carr's voice was a steady professional instrument. 3 years ago, Naval Special Warfare Command conducted a classified operation designated as Obsidian Whisper. The mission was conceived in the aftermath of intelligence indicating a terrorist cell in Yemen had acquired chemical weapons, specifically sarin gas, from government stockpiles. The cell was planning a coordinated attack on American soil, targeting a major metropolitan area during a public event. The operation was designed to prevent this catastrophe. As Carr methodically detailed the mission, Leona watched the faces around the table transform. Skepticism morphed into amazement, and amazement into a profound sense of awe and gravity. The satellite imagery showed the terrorist compound in stark topographical detail. The screens displayed intricate diagrams of the terrorist cell's command structure and their human courier network, the very network Leona had spent weeks infiltrating. The officials, seasoned military leaders who had seen everything, were captivated by the sheer audacity and scale of the operation. Carr's voice continued, a monotone narration of a desperate, high-stakes game. He explained how they needed an embedded asset, someone who could operate in a world without digital footprints. He explained why they chose Sarah Mitchell. The operation was successful beyond our most optimistic projections, Carr continued, his voice rising slightly, a hint of pride in his tone. The terrorist cell was neutralized, the chemical weapons were secured, and American lives were saved. However, the operation required the participation of an individual whose involvement had to remain classified for operational security. This individual volunteered for an assignment that required her to assume a false identity, infiltrate a terrorist organization, and coordinate with a SEAL team using protocols she learned in just 2 weeks of training. The screens flashed and a new element appeared. The grainy black and white footage of a SEAL team's helmet cam began to play. The shaky video showed a dark, hostile maze of alleyways and crumbling buildings. Over the radio, a voice, a female voice, Leona's voice, but younger, more frantic, crackled with a chilling professional calm. "Bravo team, move to checkpoint 5. Diversion Alpha is live. The enemy is moving north. Do not engage. Repeat, do not engage." The footage showed the team leader, Chief Monroe, making subtle, almost imperceptible hand signals in response. Then the video shifted to a drone's perspective, a high-altitude shot of the city, and a small lone figure moving through the chaos, a tiny silhouette on a rooftop. The radio voice continued, "2 hostiles on your 6. Take the lower path. I'm rerouting their patrol." The officials at the table, who had only heard whispers of Leona's courage, were now watching it unfold in real time. The radio transcripts flashed on a side screen, revealing her voice coordinating the rescue operation with a precision that impressed even these seasoned military leaders. General Hawkins leaned forward, her expression a mix of awe and disbelief. She was guiding them through a city they didn't know, in the middle of a live engagement using a communication network she hijacked from the enemy. Her voice, normally an impassive instrument of command, held a note of genuine shock. "That is correct," General Carr confirmed. "She didn't just save 6 SEALs, she turned the terrorists' own communication network against them, created diversions that split their forces, and guided our teams to safety through routes that, by all accounts, shouldn't have existed." Her performance was exceptional by any measure. Secretary Williams, who had been silent and unmoving, finally spoke. His eyes, fixed on Leona through the video link, held an intense, penetrating gaze. "Major Park, why didn't you reveal this information during your interrogation?" Leona stood at attention, her posture perfect, her voice steady and clear. "Sir, I was bound by operational security protocols that prohibited disclosure without proper authorization. I maintained those protocols until I was certain that revealing the information was necessary to prevent a greater security breach. I provided a code to Colonel Jensen, a code that was given to me for this very purpose, Obsidian Whisper." Director Vance spoke for the first time, his voice a low growl. "Admiral, what's the current threat assessment regarding this operation? Why is this being brought to us now, 3 years later?" Carr's expression darkened. "Intelligence indicates the terrorist elements from that cell are actively seeking revenge against Ghostwalker participants. They believe Sarah Mitchell is still alive and has a connection to American Special Forces. Major Park's knowledge of SEAL protocols, while legitimately acquired, makes her a target. She is not just a breach of security, she is a beacon. We need to bring her under protective oversight while utilizing her unique experience for future operations." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The weight of the decision settled on the shoulders of the officials, a burden of life and death, of secrecy and transparency. Leona realized that her life had just been fundamentally altered by forces beyond her control. The secret she had carried for 3 years was now the subject of discussion at the highest levels of American military leadership. General Hawkins was the first to speak. "Admiral, what are you recommending?" "I'm recommending that Major Park be assigned to a new joint task force focused on counter-terrorism operations in the Middle East. Her experience with both conventional intelligence work and special operations makes her uniquely qualified for this role." Additionally, the assignment would provide the security oversight necessary to protect her from potential retaliation. Leona's heart pounded a frantic rhythm against her ribs. This was it, the moment of her hard decision, the choice between disappearing back into the shadows of anonymity or stepping into the stark, dangerous light of truth was being made for her. She wasn't an active participant anymore. She was a subject, a living piece of evidence in a deliberation of immense consequence. The choice had been taken from her, and in its place was the profound, terrifying reality that her life would be forever changed by the outcome of this meeting. The weight of her new responsibility, the implicit choice to risk her life to protect others, settled on her shoulders with the force of a physical burden. On the main screen, Secretary Williams's expression remained unreadable, a stone-faced arbiter of fate. "General Rourke," he said, his voice cutting through the tension in the room, "what is your final assessment of Major Park's performance and reliability, given your initial encounter with her?" All eyes in the room, both those present and those watching on screen, turned to Rourke. He was the final voice, the last piece of the puzzle. Leona watched him, and in his eyes she saw something that hadn't been there during their first encounter. It was no longer the cunning of a predator or the shock of discovery. It was respect, a deep, professional admiration that had been earned through her silence and resilience. He looked directly at Leona, a silent acknowledgement of their game of cat and mouse, and then turned his gaze back to the screen. "Mr. Secretary," Rourke began, his voice devoid of any pretense, "Major Park demonstrated exceptional operational security under the most intense pressure. Her knowledge of classified protocols, while initially concerning, appears to have been legitimately acquired through official channels for a mission of the highest importance. She is, without question, an officer of unimpeachable integrity and profound competence. I not only recommend approval of Admiral Carr's proposal, but I also endorse her without reservation for any mission deemed critical to national security." With Rourke's powerful endorsement, the final piece of the puzzle fell into place. Secretary Williams gave a sharp, decisive nod. "So be it. The proposal is approved." He looked at Leona through the video link, his gaze softening slightly, a flicker of empathy crossing his stern features. "Major Park, you have been given a second chance at a first life. Don't waste it." The screens went dark, and the weight of his words, of the decision made, settled on Leona. Her ghost life was over. Her real life, a life of duty, danger, and a newfound purpose, was just beginning. The meeting ended, the screens went dark, and Leona was left with the profound, unsettling sense of a chapter ending. She had survived the ordeal, her secret was out. Her ghost was no longer in the system, it was now a recognized, living, breathing asset. Her future was no longer an endless loop of silence and secrecy, but a clear and terrifyingly dangerous path forward. The signal she had given in that office had not just saved her, it had changed her life forever. The next morning, the sterile coldness of the interrogation room was replaced by the hushed solemnity of a smaller, more intimate Pentagon conference room. The atmosphere was different, not charged with suspicion and power plays, but with a quiet dignity and a sense of shared, weighty purpose. It was a place for closure, for a truth that was too profound for public record. Present were Admiral Carr, a weary but resolute figure, General Rourke, whose expression now held a profound, humbling respect, and Colonel Jensen, whose sharp edges had been softened by the previous night's revelations. But a different kind of energy filled the room with the arrival of a new figure. Chief Petty Officer Caleb Monroe, the team leader from Operation Obsidian Whisper. He had flown in from Virginia Beach overnight, and his presence, with his broad shoulders and no-nonsense demeanor, was a tangible reminder of the world Leona had left behind. The air in the quiet room, already thick with the solemn weight of the ceremony, suddenly shifted with the arrival of a new, powerful presence. Chief Petty Officer Caleb Monroe strode into the room, his form commanding, his movements powerful and unhurried. He was a force of nature in a sea of starched uniforms and polished shoes. His eyes, the color of a stormy sea after a long night of fighting, swept the room, dismissive of the high-ranking officers, and settled on Leona, a flash of recognition and raw emotion crossing his face. It wasn't a polite smile, it was a deep, heartfelt expression of profound relief, pride, and the kind of unreserved joy that comes from seeing a ghost from your past standing solid before you. A gruff smile, a smile that was all battle-worn teeth and genuine affection, spread across his lips as he moved toward her. Doc, his voice deep and resonant, filled the room, a sound Leona hadn't heard in 3 years. It was a name, a term of endearment and respect that cut through the military formalities and spoke to a bond forged in the crucible of combat. It was a word that meant more to her than any rank, any medal, any commendation. It was a word that instantly, completely tore down the walls of her composure. The armor of military discipline she had worn for years, the mask of unreadable professionalism cracked, and a genuine, uninhibited smile she hadn't realized she was capable of broke across her face. Monroe didn't hesitate. He pulled her into a powerful bear hug that lifted her slightly off the ground, a gesture of deep, unreserved relief and gratitude. His arms, strong and solid, were a safe harbor she hadn't known she was so desperately seeking. The embrace was a physical acknowledgement of their shared history, a silent promise that their bond was not a secret to be buried, but a truth to be held tight. "Damn good to see you again," he rumbled, his voice thick with emotion. "Heard you caused quite a stir around here. Never doubted you for a second, though. Not for one goddamn minute." Leona's laughter was a genuine, heartfelt sound that felt foreign and exhilarating, a physical release of 3 years of pent-up emotion, a monumental weight she hadn't realized she'd been carrying, a burden of secrecy and isolation lifted from her shoulders. "Good to see you too, Chief," she said, her voice catching just slightly with emotion. "How's the team? Still ugly? Still causing trouble?" Her words, simple and familiar, were more than just a question. They were a confirmation that she was still a part of them, a cherished member of a brotherhood that had never forgotten her. Monroe's laugh was a sharp bark. "Still ugly, still dangerous, and still grateful to be alive thanks to you." His expression grew serious as he pulled away. "Admiral Carr told me about the new assignment. You sure you're ready to get back into the game?" Before Leona could answer, Admiral Carr stepped forward, carrying a black presentation box. The air in the room grew solemn, the mood shifting from a joyous reunion to a formal ceremony. Carr's voice, now official and resonant, commanded their attention. "Major Leona Park, by order of the Secretary of Defense, and with the approval of the President of the United States, you are hereby awarded the Navy Cross for extraordinary heroism in connection with military operations against an armed enemy." Leona's breath caught in her throat. The Navy Cross. It was the second highest military decoration that could be awarded to a member of the United States Navy or Marine Corps. The fact that it was being awarded to an Army officer was virtually unheard of. It was an honor so profound, so rare, that it bordered on mythical. Carr opened the box to reveal the medal, a bronze cross suspended from a blue and white ribbon. The cross itself, with its intricate design and subtle gravitas, seemed to hum with the weight of its meaning. "This award will remain classified," Carr continued, his voice a low, steady sound. "The citation will be sealed, and the operation it recognizes will not appear in any public record. But know this, Major, your actions 3 years ago prevented a catastrophe that would have changed the course of American history. You acted with courage, selflessness, and a tactical brilliance that saved 6% of our nation's most valuable assets. You are a hero and a credit to the military." He pinned the medal to her uniform, the weight of the bronze a physical reminder of the secret she would continue to carry. Leona felt tears threatening again, but this time they were not born of fear or exhaustion, but of pride and an overwhelming sense of vindication. General Rourke stepped forward next, his posture rigid but his expression humbled. He looked directly at Leona, his eyes holding a depth of respect that had not been there before. "Major Park, I owe you an apology. My test yesterday was designed to evaluate your knowledge and reactions under pressure. I never imagined it would uncover a genuine American hero. Your operational security was second to none. I stand corrected, and I recommend you for any mission, no matter how impossible." The words were a powerful testament to her ordeal, a final public acknowledgement that she had not only passed his test, but had done so while protecting a truth far greater than his comprehension. Leona simply nodded, a silent acceptance of his apology. Colonel Jensen, who had spent the previous day trying to break her, now extended her hand with genuine respect. Her voice, though still professional, held a new warmth. "Major, I've been in this business for 15 years, and I've never seen operational security maintained under that level of pressure. It was impressive. Your professionalism under fire is something I'll be teaching my people for years to come. I'm sorry for what you had to endure." Leona took her hand, a brief handshake that marked the end of their confrontation and the beginning of a new professional relationship built on respect rather than suspicion. The air of reconciliation filled the room, a quiet, unspoken understanding that everyone present was now part of a shared secret. Admiral Carr cleared his throat, bringing the proceedings to a close. "Major, your new assignment begins Monday. You'll be working with a joint task force that includes elements from all branches of the military and several intelligence agencies. Your experience with both conventional intelligence work and special operations will be invaluable. You are no longer a ghost in the system. You are a key asset." As the ceremony concluded and the participants began to file out, Chief Monroe lingered behind. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small metal object. "Doc, I got something for you," he said, his voice quiet, his eyes serious. It was a SEAL Team Challenge coin, worn smooth by years of handling. "This belonged to Petty Officer Riley Chen," Monroe said softly. "He was the youngest member of our team in Yemen. Kid was scared out of his mind during that whole operation, but your voice on the radio, it kept him calm. He wanted you to have this, but we couldn't contact you after the mission was classified." Leona took the coin, feeling its weight in her palm. "Where is Martinez now?" Her voice was a soft whisper. Monroe smiled, a genuine fatherly expression. "He's a chief petty officer now, married with 2 kids, stationed in San Diego. Still talks about the mysterious journalist who saved his life." His expression grew serious. "Doc, what you did over there, it mattered. Not just the mission, but the way you took care of us. You became part of the team. And SEALs, we don't forget our own." The coin, a small piece of metal, held more meaning than the Navy Cross now pinned to her uniform. It was not a classified honor, it was a personal one. It was a silent promise, a symbol of a bond that would never be broken. She was no longer just Major Leona Park, Army intelligence officer with a mysterious gap in her service record. She was a SEAL Team sister, a ghost in the system who had saved their lives, and she was finally, truly seen. The final handshake, the last words of gratitude from Chief Monroe, faded into the quiet hum of the Pentagon's inner workings. Leona was left alone in the small conference room, the weight of the Navy cross a new, unfamiliar sensation on her uniform. It was a cold, heavy piece of metal, but it felt warmer than any decoration she had ever worn, for it was not a reward for a simple act of bravery. It was a tangible acknowledgement of a truth that had been carefully buried, a truth that had now been resurrected. In her palm, she held the challenge coin, worn smooth by years of handling, a stark contrast to the pristine medal on her chest. The medal was a symbol of her valor in the eyes of her nation. The coin was a silent, personal promise, a testament to a brotherhood forged in the fires of a forgotten mission. One was a public honor, albeit a classified one. The other was a private, sacred bond. She stood for a long time, the silence of the room a welcome blanket after the emotional turmoil of the past 24 hours. Her mind replayed the events, a dizzying, surreal sequence that had started with a subtle hand signal in an office and had culminated in a private ceremony with the highest-ranking officers in the country. She was no longer just Major Leona Park, Army intelligence officer. She was a ghost who had come in from the cold, a hero whose actions were now known, and a sister to 6 men who were still alive because of her. The years of suppressing her past, of living a lie, of carrying the weight of a secret she couldn't share, All of it had led to this single moment of profound clarity. The quiet, anonymous life she had built was over. A new, more dangerous, but ultimately more authentic life was about to begin. She walked out of the conference room and into the Pentagon's inner corridors. The journey was different. The corridors, once a labyrinth of sterile intimidation, now seemed like a familiar path, the echoes of her footsteps no longer a sound of dread, but of purpose. The military police, who had once been an ominous presence, now offered her respectful nods, their gaze holding a subtle deference that spoke volumes. The Pentagon, that colossal fortress of secrets and power, no longer felt like a prison. It felt like a home, albeit a very strange one. Leona emerged from the building and into the late afternoon daylight. The contrast was breathtaking. The sterile, artificial light of the underground rooms was replaced by the warm, golden glow of a setting sun. The air was cool and fresh, a welcome relief from the recycled, filtered atmosphere she had grown accustomed to. The weight of the Navy Cross on her uniform, the challenge coin in her palm, the clear orange-streaked sky above. It was all a profound physical manifestation of a truth she could finally, for the first time in 3 years, be proud of. The faint, almost invisible scar that traced the curve of her left cheek, once a painful reminder of her 2 separate lives, now felt like a badge of honor, a mark of the past and the present finally, truly merging into one. Her new reality was already taking shape. She was no longer just an intelligence officer. She was an official part of a joint task force, an elite unit composed of the best and brightest from all branches of the military and several intelligence agencies. Her new life would be a far more complex and dangerous one, but it was a life of purpose. Her new assignment was clear: to counter the new wave of threats from remnants of the terrorist cells she had helped neutralize. The terrorists were no longer just a ghost from her past. They were a living, breathing threat, and they were actively hunting. Her knowledge of their tactics, their network, and their operational security, a knowledge she had paid a heavy price for, was now her most valuable weapon. She sat in her car, the engine silent, and looked out at the city. The hand signal, the tiny, seemingly insignificant gesture that had unraveled 3 years of secrecy, now felt like a key, a wordless language that had unlocked her past and her future. It had been an unconscious action, a flicker of muscle memory that had irrevocably altered the course of her life. It was not just a signal of distress, it was a symbol of the truth, of her past and of her future. It was a testament to the fact that her deepest identity was not the one listed on her official military record, but the one forged in the heat of battle, a ghost operative known only as Sarah Mitchell. The journey of the past 3 years had been a solitary, lonely walk in the shadows. The future, though it held the promise of danger and new enemies, would not be as lonely. She had the Navy Cross, a symbol of her valor. She had the challenge coin, a symbol of her brotherhood. She had a purpose, a new assignment, and a team that knew exactly who she was. The days of hiding were over. The days of carrying the secret alone had come to an end. The war she had fought in the shadows was about to become a public, if still classified, reality. She was no longer just an intelligence officer. She was a signal bearer, a person who carried the weight of a monumental secret, a living link between the clean, formal world of military intelligence and the dirty, brutal world of special operations. Her unique experience was no longer a burden of secrecy, but a key to future missions. Her identity was now a weapon, her history a tool. She was a guardian of the shadows, a beacon of truth in a world of lies. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new missions, and new opportunities to serve her country. But tonight, for the first time in 3 years, she could finally be proud of who she really was. She was not just a ghost in the system, a forgotten operative whose past had been erased. She was Major Leona Park, a decorated hero, a soldier with a new mission and a truth that had set her free. The signal that had started it all had now become her identity, a silent promise to the world that she would always be ready to answer the call. The story of Sarah Mitchell had ended in the desert of Yemen, but the legend of the signal bearer was just beginning. The sun set over Seattle, and Leona watched the city lights begin to flicker on, each one a tiny beacon in the growing darkness. She was no longer hiding in the shadows. She was now watching from a different place, a place of power, purpose, and profound truth. And so we close the book on the extraordinary journey of Major Leona Park, the signal bearer. Her story is more than just an account of a classified operation. It is a profound meditation on the nature of identity, the weight of sacrifice, and the quiet courage it takes to carry a truth no one else can. For 3 years, she lived a life as a ghost, her past a carefully constructed lie designed to protect both a nation and a secret brotherhood. She was Sarah Mitchell, the war correspondent who died in a lie, and Major Leona Park, the officer who lived in silence. But in the quiet moments of an interrogation, she made a choice to bridge those two lives, to bring a ghost in from the cold and, in doing so, to finally see herself for who she truly was. Her journey reminds us that heroism is not always a loud public act celebrated in parades and headlines. It is often a silent, solitary burden carried by those who work in the shadows. The Navy Cross, now pinned to her uniform, is a testament to her valor, but the challenge coin, worn smooth in her palm, is a testament to something deeper, the sacred bond of a team, a family forged not by blood but by fire. She is no longer defined by her past, but by her future. A future she chose by embracing the full, unvarnished truth of who she is. Here at Veteran Biker, we believe that every journey, whether on the open road or through the silent halls of power, has a story to tell. We are a community of riders, of patriots, and of storytellers who believe in the power of resilience, the strength of the human spirit, and the enduring value of courage. We are honored to have shared this incredible narrative with you, and we hope it has resonated with you on a personal level. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts for joining us. Your support fuels our journey and allows us to continue bringing these powerful, often untold stories to life. We pour our hearts and souls into every script, every frame, every voiceover, and knowing that you are watching makes every single moment worthwhile. We want to hear from you. We want to know your thoughts. Did Leona make the right decision in revealing her secret? What did you feel when you heard Chief Monroe's words about the challenge coin? Do you believe her new mission with the Joint Task Force will finally give her the peace she deserves? Share your opinions, your insights, and your emotions in the comments below. Your feedback helps us shape our content and build a community that values truth, honor, and sacrifice. If you were captivated by Leona's story, if it stirred something within you, we invite you to become a part of our family. Hit that like button to show your support, and subscribe to the Veteran Biker channel so you never miss another epic journey. We have many more stories to tell, many more roads to ride, and many more truths to uncover. For those of you who want to dive deeper into the world of courage and transformation, we have curated a selection of videos just for you. Be sure to check out the other powerful stories appearing on your screen now. Until next time, stay safe on your own journey. And remember that sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones who learn to embrace their own ghosts.